Go ahead, Arva.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to the first edition of the Communicators Assembly Point. When a fire breaks out, everyone is asked to gather at an assembly point, a safe space. This here today is the assembly point. This is where we discuss with senior professionals on how they plan to navigate reputation in the post-COVID era and take communications ahead. The Communicator Assembly Point is presented by AdFactors PR in partnership with Reputation Today. We will bring you one webinar every Friday this month with specialized discussions from various sectors. The focus for today is the BFSI sector. The hashtag for today's session is Comms Ahead. This will also be live streamed on YouTube at bit.ly/YT. That's bit.ly/YT. But you may only ask questions if you are on Zoom using the Q&A box here, please. A request, please do not type in your questions in the chat box. Please type them in the Q&A box. Today we have with us Dimple Kapoor, who leads communications for the Piramal Group, Ritesh Mehta, who manages communications at the State Bank of India, and Shilpa Desai, who heads marketing at Fullerton India, as our panelists. Moderating the session today is Arva Hussain, Director at Factors PR. Over to you, Arva.
Thank you, Anubhuti. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of AdFactors PR, Reputation Today, and the banking and financial services practice that I represent, I welcome you to the first cluster-focused dialogue. There is a reason why we wanted to open this dialogue with the BFSI sector. These are unprecedented times. While we have successfully completed a 45-day lockdown regime, many thousand jobs have been wiped out. Several industries have also ceased to exist, some of them like the travel and tourism industry that we knew of. Government finances everywhere are stretched, whether it's an individual finance or corporate finance or public finance. There is an impending crisis everywhere. All these issues are likely to wash up on the shores of the BFSI territory. How does the sector assess the scale of some of these issues? Will there be massive defaults? Will there be issues on premium collection? It is certain that a new consumption trend is emerging. Will it simply alter the earlier consumption pattern? Will there be capex issues? There could be an impending demand on the credit. It would therefore be no exaggeration to say that the banking and financial services sector is today at the crossroads like never before. As communications panelists, what can we tell our management? What trends can we discern? What are the risky environments that we are in today, and how do we need to prepare ourselves? In this webinar, we want to engage an interaction on all these crucial factors that will take us ahead of the curve, and the BFSI sector should be the guiding light for the rest to follow. And on that note, my first question to the esteemed panelists here. Since the lockdown, if you could share your experience as communications professionals, what changed, what have you done, and what have you adopted? Shilpa, do you want to go first?
Sure. And a big hi to everyone and a good afternoon. It's quite true that these times are unprecedented, and we've always seen that as life is reflected in our work, what we do at work is reflected in our life. And as an organization whose primary job is to serve retail customers, we are at the front end of all the impact of COVID happening. Let me share some quick insights in what we see in the past 45-50 days. The credit cycle typically tends to be extremely cyclical this time of the year, otherwise too, organically. So Jan, Feb, March, from a sales standpoint, usually peaks as in every organization, but the demand for credit sees a slow growth in the March, April, May periods historically. Now, if that's an organic trend, along with that, the fact that people are locked down and they're not able to manage day to day also has an overall impact on their demand for credit itself. So it's a double whammy. In addition, if you have periods of lockdown and people not being able to go out and work, and a large population of the self-employed segment which we serve also not being fully functional, topping that is the fact that the RBI extended moratorium for deserving customers, by design, it's going to make the entire credit market extremely sluggish. And like I started saying that, life reflects work and work reflects on life, we found a bigger opportunity to reach out to our people to tell them that, yes, we are very cognizant of the fact that, you're going through tiring times and it's really tough. And in every possible way, whether it's extension of your EMI dates via moratorium, providing them the ability and the facility to do that within the confined areas of their houses, reaching out to them saying that don't worry, everything that you need, we're there. So though we are technically not on the ground out there, we're all fully connected as far as our customers are concerned. And if all of you would have noticed in the past 40, 50 days, isn't it true that most of us are talking to people much more than we ever had in our entire life? It's also to do with the fact that at one level we are missing people around us, and I think the other level, this need to be constantly connected has become more severe or acute. And as financiers, we find that extremely prominent in this time. The more we reach out to our customers, and we are not wanting to sell, we're just wanting to tell people that we are with you, the more receptive they are to this conversation. About 30 days ago, when we have a very large rural base, almost 3 million customers there, and when we wanted to reach out through our relationship channel, we had a question saying that would people be averse to these conversations? Would they think that we're trying to sell? You will be surprised. They were so welcoming that there's someone wanting to check if you're doing okay. I think the degree of compassion, empathy, the fact that there are real, tangible initiatives being taken to ensure that people are okay in times which are not okay has been the biggest learning, and we continue to work on it. That's my perspective from an NBFC side.
Thank you, Shilpa. What about you, Ritesh? You represent a very large bank. How has it changed? What have you adopted? What have you given up on?
So, yeah, this is the biggest crisis of, at least for all of our lives, we would have ever seen in the last few times, and I think in the decades to come. What, as far as what we have adapted, see, as a bank, we have been always on the ground. Ours is one essential service where we'll have to go to the branches, we will have to serve the people, and at the same time, the norm of social distancing has to be followed. However, what we have adapted is, at least I can say from a bank's perspective, and I think that applies to all our personal life as well. We've been more empathetic in the kind of talk we do, in the communication we do with all of us individually, as well as with our customers, with our employees. We have a employee base of about 250,000 people, more than that. We would have never communicated in such an extent what we did in the last 30, 40 days. That's the kind of communication channel we have opened up. Even same stands for the customers. We do communicate to the customers on a regular basis, but again, the kind of communication channels we have opened up with the customers have never been thought of in the last so many decades. So some positives of the kind of COVID which we have never thought. uh, as Shilpa was saying, the kind of response you get from the rural base, SBI is the largest rural base of customer, and the kind of response we have got from them also, no, we never expected such kind of response we will get from any of our customers. Social distancing, you walk into any of our branches at SBI in the normal course of time, and you would see a rush of people comparatively to other, to any other banks. But during such times, people have been very supportive. People have been understanding the problems, and the norms of social distancing or any other problems people have been understanding. So that's the kind of communication channel we have also opened up, and that's the, I would say, silver lining in such a grim scenario.
So, Dimple, you represent a very large conglomerate, right from pharma to finance. You guys are in all sectors, or pretty much a large section of them.
Yeah.
From your perspective, as a CCO, do you feel that the challenges that a financial services organization as a CCO faces is different from that of the other? Are there anything which are unique to the financial services CCO, which is different from that of the other CCOs that they face?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, and you're right, we have, presence in pharma and real estate, glass, financial services. We also have a very large foundation, which is focused on social good. But if I had to look at what is completely unique in the, financial services communication space, let me take a step back and say what really happened, in the past 1 year, and what is really now accentuated because of the pandemic. NBFC sector was already, going through a little bit of strife. It started with the ILFS issues, and it was like a domino effect on the entire industry. A lot of distrust therefore emanated, and a lot of skittishness, as I would call it, is, every little thing would create panic. And therefore it was, it is perhaps, for a BFSI comms professional, um, not only is speed of communications important, the alacrity and, how often you communicate, but also are you communicating accurately, transparently? It's always 24/7 on, with internet, with, for some odd reason, financial services has always got the spotlight on it. And the turnaround times are absolutely incredible, right? Sometimes you need to turn things around in like less than half an hour. How are you going to marry speed with accuracy and authenticity, right? Are you transparent enough? Are you able to communicate all that you want to communicate? Because for brands, if you want to retain your reputation, you have to be authentic through it all, right? So I think it's a high pressure job, but it's probably more intense as compared to the other sectors, because I think also media and stakeholders are perhaps a little more patient with other sectors as compared to financial services. But rightly so, because financial services sector is really the crux of it all, and anything that happens here has a domino effect and a spillover effect in every other industry. So yeah, and in terms of COVID, I mean, the pandemic, how have things actually, changed is, I think the distress has gotten a little more heightened. And as you say, in terms of crisis, you probably need more information. So perhaps more contiguous. So the 3 C's of communication is perhaps critical at this point in time. Really, are you compassionate in your communications? Are you empathetic? Are you communicating often enough? So constantly and contiguous communication is really the need of the hour. And the third one is, how are you connecting? Are you relevant? Are you actually answering the questions that you want? So the skill sets are, perhaps a little more heightened in the financial services sector, probably because the demands are perhaps higher. Not to say the sectors don't, before I get, needled on that, but perhaps this is perhaps more fast-paced.
And how would you react to that, Shilpa?
I couldn't agree, any different. I think what's primary to anybody's life, if you ask me, any person standing on the road, I think after politics and religion, the single most important factor which determines happiness quotient is money, access to your own money. I mean, it's as fundamental as that. And that's one area, if you don't get it right, then everything will go wrong. So it's the crux of what you do. If you see the kind of news that happens on migrant public moving here, and it's all driven by just one thing, which is access to money to just have a very normal life. And if that's the sector you operate in, you will by design be required to be far more sensitive, far more on top of things, and always aware of what the customer is going to need. There is no two way about it. In addition, I also realized, I've been in financial services long enough. One is access to your money, but the bigger thing is also access to information about your money. And in that context, this constant communication, whether it's to do with what's happened on my account, can I refinance my loan, or can I do this, can I defer payments, all of that becomes so important, because you're actually playing on people's nerves. That the point that, can I continue to service my loan, I have people at home, is going to be a very difficult job for a communication specialist to do, because most of the factors are beyond you. It's the ecosystem that has changed. Even within that, if you hold one of the key levers, which is access to funds, you have got to be far more deeper in the way you understand people's discomfort and are able to provide very tangible and, in my mind, material ways of allowing them to live life a little more comfortably than it currently is.
So on that note, actually, Ritesh, I want to ask you, given that you have such a large customer base, what gives you actually sleepless nights?
Yeah, there are lots, but one thing which I would like to add to your previous question, which you were discussing with Dimple and Shilpa, what is one thing which, as a communication person of BFSI sector, is different from other sector? As a BFSI sector, we are continuously on ground there at the people. As far as my understanding goes, except for pharma, none of the organized sectors which are there on ground still fighting over, in the COVID. You know, over the COVID, and there are still people on the ground. About 10 lakhs of the banking sector employees are working every day, risking their own lives. So, as much as you communicate with your with media, with your customers, it is equally important to communicate with your employees, because at the crux of it, their safety is equally important as much as anybody else's safety is. Uh, what gives us sleepless nights? The same answer which I would like to again repeat. Safety of our employees and safety of our customers. Anything happening to any of our customers walking into our branches, or walking any employees walking into our branches, anything happening to them can give us a sleepless night, because that has a bearing on everything today we work. At the same time, if we are doing things in a more empathetic manner, we have to be very careful of what we're communicating. Any wrong communication can actually damage the whole reputation, and actually the work of our employees, which everybody is doing on day-to-day basis.
Okay, this question is to all of you actually. So in our experience as BFSI leaders, we normally like to see messaging, and our narratives are not normally in the Economic Times or in the CNBC, the traditional media as we knew of. In the post-COVID world, will this get impacted? We have already seen some signs, but how do you see that going forward in the post-COVID world? This question is open to any one of you first, whoever wants to like to take it.
Yeah, so I'll go first. I think, there is no doubt that communications platforms will absolutely go through transformation because, as is true of any crisis, it is a catalyst for transformation and change, right? And very often for things that will perhaps be done more efficiently, more, in a better league. Having said that, brands like ET, CNBC, the kind of loyalty and trust that they have already with target audiences, I don't think you can actually replace that quickly. So if I had to actually say, there's a very, very high probability that's not going to change. However, given the situation, everyone's, transforming, thinking agilely, how they're going to actually create new formats and new platforms. So in my view, ET and CNBC perhaps will also, and brands like that, and others as well, will perhaps go through some amount of transformation. But through it all, they've been ingenuous and innovative in how they still connect with their audiences, and that's been commendable through it all. There was a time when newspapers were thought as being not really safe to have on in your homes. They created PDFs of print versions that has been circulating. I'm sure each one of us here as communicators has not missed a single day of ET or CNBC. So the fact remains that they will be here for a long time to come. Whether they evolve and change their formats as well is something that will, that will perhaps, it's inevitable. All of us will change.
I have a very, very different take, and that comes from maybe the fact that over the past few years, we've seen a very, very distinct trend, and I'll share it in a bit. In my mind, whether it's a CNBC or any channel, they're all mediums of communication who, at the moment, have popularity on a certain format, which is television. But if you look at most of the popular guys, they have a presence on television as a primary channel, but you will see them far more active on other digital formats simply because different audiences prefer to consume content on different formats. That's just the way we are. We are We are very happy having a newspaper in the morning along with our daily tea. But at the same time, if I just want to get a quick summation of what's happening, I find Twitter to be far more informative and quick to understand than reading a 24-page newspaper, which I may probably not have enough time or inclination to do. Second, and I think most important, is the differentiation between mediums itself for the same piece of content. Television continues to be a laid back medium. It's a one to many medium. Digital is completely different, such a hyperactive medium. It forces you to jump and be part of a conversation. The beauty of both of these have their nuances. So you find an example of, say, Rajdeep Sardesai, if the way his persona is on television, on a Twitter kind of a format or any other social format, the kind of opportunity there is to do dialogue with far more people and hear counter and similar views is enormous. So I don't think it's a question of this versus that. In my mind, it is all defined by what the audience wants to know, when it wants to know where. For example, for me, my primary news channel for any kind of news will continue to be Twitter. It keeps me current. When I have the time and the luxury, I may want little more elaborative stuff. I may look at television. But in my mind, that shift is so seamless, I won't even know unless someone were to actively track. So we're pretty, the continuum in which we consume information. So they will have their place in the way they have stature and all of that. But it's pretty much the newer versus younger audiences who want to consume what they want in the bites in which they want. I don't think that that era of sitting through an entire newspaper is there anymore. We just don't have the attention span, and we want to get to the news quickly. Formats which allow us to do that are quickly consumed as compared to the longer formats.
Right. On that note, actually, Shilpa, I have another question for you. And that is, as a marketing professional, segmenting the market as per the audience has always been something that you always do, right? But when it comes to comms, typically it's always largely restricted to corporate messaging. Do you see comms taking on more of target audience-based communication with the new whole digital world changing on?
200%. And I think it's more to do with being the need of the hour. And I'll take a step back. And you're quite right. It's always been corporate and one message to a large audience. It's been a very traditional and an easy way of communicating. You just create one segment and hope or imagine that everyone will consume it in the same way. With digital, that's completely transformed because the kind of access to information you have about people who are digitally connected is enormous. The other piece, which is the biggest thing in digital, is the ability to measure impact. With both of these things, the ability to micro segment our audience and to cater different messages to different audiences with the ability to measure impact and effectiveness are extremely potent for you to define of your overall marketing money is what percentage of your money would you want to put into avenues that allow you to correct, measure, and maybe change gears to be able to suit the needs of the audience of today and tomorrow. So to that extent, I think digital by design offers you that. Reach, obviously, it just happens like in any marketer, we will always say anything that I wish to communicate, TV becomes by default your primary channel. We are then discounting the kind of reach digital, and digital is not equal to desktop, mobile. Digital is any format which allows you to access content in a digital way. The kind of reach you've got with the geos and data rates being so low is so large that that has become far more predominant, more current, more relevant and contextual as compared to any other traditional method. They will happily coexist, no doubt, but what you can do with each medium is undergoing a huge change than ever before.
Ritesh, just taking on from what Shilpa was just mentioning, what's your view really on how digital is going to shape comms and what would be in your playbook from tomorrow?
So indeed, there is no second thought about it. Digital is playing and will play an important role. In fact, at our place, we were already using digital as a format, as a form to communicate. But with this COVID, it actually gives us more opportunity to use more digital and consumption of digital. There are data to support that consumption of social media uh, as well as other digital mediums has increased a large formats. But at the same time, I am of also the view that TV is not going to go off very soon, or print is not going to go off very soon. It will be here to stay. But because digital has a limited audience, we can talk about Twitter or Facebook, kind of communication, but that has the new age audience, the larger audience. But at the same time, if somebody is focusing, somebody like an SBI brand is focusing on the rural masses, There also Facebook works, but there also again print and TV will have more effectiveness comparatively. So digital is going to here to stay, and it will have more impact, and the use of digital will multiply, the way it has never been. But again, TV will never go off. It will certainly have some pie of share in the marketing budget going forward as well.
So, I mean, just I'm laboring a point a little bit on the same thing that I asked Shilpa on. Do you feel that when so far comms has focused on corporate messaging, largely, do you see target audience-based communications as a new thing that the comms would take on?
Is that question to me?
Yeah. Do you think that corporate communications would also segment their communication basis the target audience?
Definitely, yes. There is again, I mean, there is no doubt about that. We'll have to communicate our any kind of messaging by segmenting the audience, because and digital gives us that benefit to segment the audience in different formats, in different age groups, different. I can have a specific communication to a specific community or a specific geographical location or to specific age, target age. And when we communicate at our bank, we have a large section of audience into different age groups, into different geographic location, into different uh, you know kind of people we communicate to. So that kind of helps us. But yes, it we are doing more of a segment based communication. But at the same time, right now currently, more of brand communication by segmenting people into different communities, into different age groups, or into different targets audiences. So segment communication is something which we are definitely doing more after COVID.
Yeah. Okay, and this question is again to all of you. Maybe Dimple and Ritesh, you may be having a view. I have a slightly different question for Shilpa. But today there is ad tech, health tech, martech, and the new word for the communications industry is the comtech. How are you and your teams adapting or adopting to comtech? Is that something that is going to come at the forefront, given that now digital is playing a huge role in the change that is happening? Is there any upskilling that as comms that we need to do that you believe that is required? Is my question actually.
Um, Yeah, I think there's no two ways about it that digital is going to be completely integral to all kinds of communications, whether whichever part of the stakeholder community you look at. And by the very definition of reputation, it's defined by the perception that stakeholders have of the organization. And if perception is to be driven by communications, then you have to make it targeted and relevant. And digital actually provides the most relevant and hyper segmentation actually allows you to reach out to each stakeholder in a unique and actually in the speediest form possible. And like Shilpa also mentioned that when you target the same messages to different audiences have different ways of consuming it, there's definitely no two ways about it that digital is here to stay. How are we actually evolving? And you're right, each one of us needs to go through, if we haven't already, go through a crash course on digital, because honestly, you have to understand what is going to actually work in the digital medium. Everybody's already on digital already. Nobody has actually been on mobiles as before, as compared to the COVID days, right? We're constantly on mobile. And an interesting fact in the last 1 month of lockdown actually is on LinkedIn, 13% increase in actually engagements have been due to the kind of posts, reshares, reposting things that have been actually happening in the industry, not just your own voice. And there's an 8% increase in the number of posts that each one of us has actually well, not each one of us, but most of the target audiences that they actually measured, there's an 8% increase in the posts, which means that increasingly, most of us are actually consuming information on digital medium. So No two ways about it. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all of the new, platforms. However, having said that, it's not enough to have a digital campaign on. I think the need of the hour, and that's where we as communications professionals will perhaps have a significant role to play, is what is the role, what is the story you're driving? What is the narrative you're driving? How is the corporate messages being integrated seamlessly into all of the digital campaigns? And then how are you measuring impact? Because now every dollar and every rupee that you spend has to be, has to show results. So I think there's going to be a lot more accountability. There's going to be a lot of data analytics to actually back all of those.
Ritesh, your views.
Yeah, upskilling has to be a process. It's a continuous process, and again, COVID has given us an opportunity to do that. With digital coming in, all of us need to do a crash course. As Dimple said, we will all have to do a crash course if already not done, on how digital functions and how digital marketing, the whole process, digital PR and digital marketing works. Uh, Having said that, digital gives us an opportunity to play with the content as well at the same time. When we're doing using print media or a TV format, for a for any kind of communication, it gives a limited opportunity or limited scope to play around with the content. We will have to have the same TVC, more or less across the channels, or same press release or same articles across, there's very limited scope. However, when we go digital, depending on the place, depending on the platform we are using, we can have and we can tweak our communication content, and that gives us an opportunity to be more, give us more messaging, and to be more kind of elaborate in the kind of communication we do. That also allows us space to do that kind of communication. So upskilling will have to be done. Comtac, as you said, will be a way forward for all of us as communicators, as an industry. And unless we kind of use that format, we won't be relevant anymore in the times to come.
Before I open up for the floor for questions from our friends who have joined us, I wanted to ask the last question to the three of you. And that is, what would be the top 3 strategic priorities for the communications function in the financial services organizations over the next 3 months and over the next 12 months? Silpa.
So let me give you a perspective on my organization. This quarter has been tough for, as much as it's for customers, it's for lenders like us, and it's going to have an impact on not just our plans in terms of business, but on the way we look at our portfolio too. And personally, if you ask me, I see the role of a marketer not as a comms specialist, but as someone who is a face of the business to the outside world. And hence, the kind of stuff we do around comms, in my mind, it's a tool. It allows us to convert our objectives or goals as a business and translate that into what we can offer as services to our customers. In that context, if you just look at portfolio is not one homogeneous set. Different segments within our portfolio would have reacted differently to the current situation, which by design will demand us to have different marketing strategies to suit those audiences. Some of that work is already underway as we speak. So in my mind, it's not so much about communication, that is the last mile, but about working very closely with business to understand, as a result of what's happened, how has our portfolio changed? What can we as a business now continue to do as we did earlier? What is it that we can't afford to do anymore? It may not be economically viable. And what are the new segments which will emerge as a result of what's happened? And hence, in line with the strategy around business continuity, business growth, and biggest in my mind is protecting our portfolio. I think that's our primary role as a firm. And in that context, the role of a marketing team is how do we help business reach that goal better? For example, if our biggest objective today is to protect our portfolio, slicing and dicing the segments within that portfolio which contribute to higher revenues, those who are in the middle and those who are lower revenues, and what kind of nudges do we want to give to them to be able to drive the kind of behavior we want is my primary goal. To be able to do that, of course, we'll use so many communication channels. So, but deeper engagement with our business guys to be able to translate business is my primary goal. Second is, this is a time when your brand strength gets tested. how are you seen as a firm, as a brand? And it's not what we say or what we do, it's what people on the ground experience. You may claim to be empathetic, you may claim to be compassionate. Is that translated to actual work done on the ground where people start seeing meaningful material work done? For example, one of the other functions I also manage is to do with CSR. Now, that is very tough to do as an implementation plan in this time of the year, knowing fully well that most of us are locked down. Rehabilitation of people, allowing people in the geographies we service by giving them opportunities to just stay afloat through the work we do on CSR is also a very important strategic initiative for us, because these are customers who've banked with us, who've relied on us, and now it's our time to help them just stay afloat. So that's the second. And the third and most important, there are some values that the brand stands for historically, and we want them to continue. What we'll need to do maximum is continue to do all those things which reinforce that faith in the brand. For example, the promise that my brand gives is Rishta Samman Ka. We treat all our stakeholders with respect. Respect has to be felt in the way we conduct ourselves in every interaction. So these three in my mind will pretty much be the game plan for us for the next few months, because that's what will add tangible and material value to not just the brand, our business, for our customers too.
Ritesh?
So for me, couple of priorities for the next 3 to 6 months or over the 12 months period is to be the engagement with the customers. As brands, we need to keep ourselves relevant. We have been doing a lot of things, but engaging with the customer will be a very key, because I believe customers or clients comes first for any kind of businesses we do. At this time, everybody is in distress. There are a lot of job losses. There are salary cuts across, and everybody is in dire need of credit. And banks, as banks or as financial services organizations, we play a very key or a very integral role in their lives. So communication with the customer that we are there for you, we will help you in the times of need, is one of the key challenges or key priorities for us over the next couple of months. Second, at the same time, employee engagement, somehow that's my personal view that uh, keeping business relevance, keeping profits relevant, we somehow forget our employees who are actually at the ground, working 24/7 for all of us. We in sitting offices can dictate policies, can make plans, but people working on the ground, on the branches, and especially for a bank like SBI, people working in rural branches in the far-flung areas where there's no network, where hardly at times people even struggle for the basic needs. So communicating with them on the same time is also equally important, and giving them a sense of messaging that okay, uh, you know we are listening to you and we're there for you at the same time. So that's the kind of second priorities which we will have set in. A third priorities, will I will take it from your earlier question, is making digital more more engaging. How can we can maximize the use of digital going forward. If we are doing already, but we will focus and find out new ways of using digital, because as we were discussing it earlier, first of all, you can do a target customers, target messaging for digital. Secondly, it's much more cost effective compared to any other medium of communication. And as marketers or as communicators, we all know that from now on, every penny spent will have to have its results. So that's the three kind of challenges. One is customer communication, employee engagement, and third will be the digital. How can we make it more relevant, how can we use it more and more often in our any kind of communication or as a products also. These are three challenges for me.
So Dimple, what's in your roster?
Okay. So if I had to look at this entire pandemic, and break that into phases, we actually began with the immediate, and then the short term, and then we go to the medium term. In the immediate phase, what we were really, really focused on is business continuity, right? And we were grappling with how do we communicate. So some of our, we were a conglomerate, and some of our pharma sites were functional. So was our glass manufacturing sites, because we create, vials that go into the pharma industry. So one is communicating with our employees, making sure, our sites are up and running. So business continuity, we're over that immediate phase. And now we're looking at business resilience. How are we actually going to tide over this phase? what are the kind of things and initiatives that we need to take now to ensure that we actually emerge stronger. And at some point, which is the medium term, we'll probably look at business sustenance or business growth. And for the financial services or BFSI sector, already it was a volatile and uncertain and a complex business environment. And now you layer that with uncertainty and ambiguity, right? So there's a lot of skittishness, like I mentioned, and not just with external audiences, but also internal. So if we had to look at what is it that we are really focused on is, one is reassuring customers and stakeholders externally. Second would be really actually to bolster confidence in the organization. And the third, not that any of this is in priority, all of these are in parallel, is really looking at employee morale, confidence, and engagement. So what we've done in this 6-7 weeks of lockdown, honestly, is one is taken over and centralized communication to all of our customers, partners, making sure it's completely centralized. So we absolutely across 30 countries, whatever communication is going out to customers and partners, it's completely aligned. No single person is speaking or is deviating from approved messages and something that is true and relevant. We're constantly updating that. So just in the to look at it in terms of transparency and speed, that's what we're focused on. We're also doing a lot in terms of our foundation, because that's something that's very dear to our heart. Our philosophy is doing well and doing good. So a lot of initiatives with the government, especially in aspirational districts, which is those remote, difficult to reach locations, not just in metros. So we've partnered with Annamrita, which provides meals. We've talked about 1 crore and close to 30 lakh meals per day. This is for, street people. So there's also marrying not just what's business critical, but also, what is it that we do for communities in and around us. We've also taken over employee communications and engagement during these times, because we realized that, your home is now your new workplace, right? And all of us perhaps might not be used to this remote way of functioning. So a lot of humaneness, a lot of empathy, okay, you could not meet the Zoom call on video, switch it off and you can actually, join us on audio, but really connecting and staying engaged. So we've run many campaigns, and each one tailored to each of the businesses. So for pharma, we have patient serving patients. For some of us, most of us that are actually working at home, we're running our work from home diaries. So a lot of those engagements, we're actually encouraging them to be part of a talent show now, singing and dancing, just bringing in a little more positivity in this environment that is already very uncertain. But having said this we need more of that. So a lot going on, and in the midst of it all, we are also very cognizant that we need to be very frugal with our expenses. So a lot of this is being done at perhaps just phenomenally low cost, but just being creative and innovative, and how do we actually engage each of our stakeholders.
So thank you all. I'll now open the floor for questions. Actually, we've got quite a lot of questions, 18 questions we have. I don't think we can take them all, but what we'll do is I'll read out the questions. They're not specific to any one, but I'll just read out the first one that I'm reading out. This is from Amandeep, and his question is, would consumer trust be the biggest challenge that communicators in financial services sector face in the COVID era? How do you retain consumer trust when ROI is on a downward spiral? Any one of you wants to take that?
So I'll take that. I think it is one of the biggest challenge as communicators to retain the consumer trust. However, it will not be a such bigger challenge in the BFSI sector, because the BFSI sector, even during the pandemic or even during the COVID-19, is currently working. But as communicators for most of the brands, it's the biggest challenge. How do we retain trust of the consumer post COVID-19 scenario? the only answer is to communicate, communicate, communicate. So when I was talking about the top three challenges, when I was discussing that, one of the challenges I is consumers communication is very important at this time. Everybody is kind of scared of, beat all of our consumers. People have lost jobs. People have got salary cuts. People are ill. People are sick. So getting communication directly from the brand itself will help a lot in any brand. Most of the times we often do that. If we have to make an announcement, we go through media, we go through press releases, advertisements, and stuff like that. But if I have a direct communication, or if in a direct email from brand SBI or from brand anybody to a consumer, there is more assurance in such kind of communication. I can communicate whatever I want. Most of the times through media, the communication gets filtered. However, if I'm doing a direct communication through the to any channels to the consumers, I can have a direct communication, and the message doesn't get filtered. So, and it's more assuring that it is coming from directly from the brand, rather than people speculating, or people writing half things which is not actually correct half most of the times.
Yeah. Dimple, Shilpa, any one of you have anything further?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'd like to take this. I personally believe a brand is what a brand does. It's not limited to what it says, what it's to do with what it does as a firm, because that's the face of the large. We have a very strong model in our rural business, which is what we call sell and collect, which is the same set of people who make a sale are the same set of people who collect. And because our rural business is so large and in absolute interiors, it's a typical man on the street who goes and collects. Now, in this time, that entire process has come to a halt because we are not really able to do all of that. In that time, when I mean that a brand is what a brand does, collections, as you can understand, you're trying to juggle between ROI on business and managing customer trust. This is the time where your becomes an important element, a part of running business, but you're also challenged in the way you're going to show empathy and compassion towards your customers, because they are in extremely tiring times. And then how do you manage this jugglery between managing your business goal and managing your customer goal? So that is something that we are very, very, very careful in the way we tread. For example, yes, communication is important, but what kind of policies which are customer friendly, which will see us or see customers feeling real value out of association with us. That for us is very primary. For example, a significant portion of our customer base, if they are not in a position to service their existing loans, how are we making them available options so that they can defer it? How are we using communication channels for them to know for them to opt in for that? And how do we ensure that their own loans are repurposed? Now, that is as much a job for communication as it is for policy itself. So when you start putting very tangible initiatives in the way we manage, I'll give a simple case. The scripts that we use for the front line just to be able to make a conversation with our customers are nothing to do with sales or collections. It's a conscious choice, because at this time we know our customers are going to be extremely discomforted and not in a comfortable state. How do we ensure that they feel that, look, we know you're in tough times and we are with you. We just called to say how well you're doing. Of course, it has a direct impact on the way we look at our portfolio, but that's the trade-off I'm talking about. There are some set of customers who can afford to continue to pay. There are some set of customers who can't. Who do you reach out to? What do you say? And how do you ensure continue to them? Is one of the biggest things that we ourselves put a lot of time and effort on. And I think this is what will continue to build trust. It's what we do rather than what we say.
Thank you.
Yes, so I'd like to add something there, Arwa. And I truly believe that that the idea of being truthful is actually it's magnified during a crisis, right? And very often it's not as much the crisis, but how it's handled that actually creates damage. And when we talk about corporate reputation, also crisis occurs very often when there is a violation of stakeholder expectations. And what could these be? For example, products must not harm us, right? Or if you borrow from a bank, you must pay it back. You must make your repayments on time. It's a valid expectation. It could also be that management should not lie. They should be transparent and communicative. These are expectations. And And very often a violation of these expectations actually leads to or jeopardizes the relationship between the organization and its stakeholders. And therefore, I believe it's extremely critical to maintain trust and confidence in stakeholders, customers, and in especially times of uncertainty and ambiguity. Uh, Most customers will get brand promises, which means that they'll just take whichever they feel at that point makes better sense. And therefore, it's important to actually reiterate confidence in not just the company and its products, but the ethos and what it stands for. And therefore, it's very important now to really see what is it that you're doing in times of crisis. How are you engaging with your communities? What is it that you're doing for your employees? All of those elements now get completely magnified. And therefore, all of these add up to build customer trust.
Thank you. The next question is from Rakhi Lalwani. How do you keep your brand alive during COVID? Any examples from panelists on what they have done, which is responsible, compassionate, and yet from a marketing lens?
So I can go first on that. I don't know if it was marketing led, but we do have a foundation, and all that we do is a PPP model, which is a public-private partnership. We partner with the government at various levels, right from central, state, and district level, in clean drinking water access, in education, and then in primary health care. Especially during COVID, we've been very active both through our Swasthya, which is our healthcare programs, to actually reach out to marginalized sections of society, and actually set up in a 104 helpline where people can actually call and not just get information, but also get connected to hospitals and other uh, access to other facilities and services that can help them if they're actually COVID positive. So that's one of the things that we're doing through Swasthya. Through our education initiative, we realize that right now schools are all shut, right? So what do? Do we actually stay at home? But we actually innovate, and the teams have been absolutely fantastic in doing that with the government. They've looked at how can we spread awareness and protect the senior citizens of, again, these aspirational districts, which is difficult to reach through digital mediums. And like I said, going back to my earlier, construct, that not every platform is relevant to every audiences. So these marginalized sections of society, you do need personal contact. So we have Gandhi Fellows, 2,000 of them, who are going on ground and supporting senior citizens. We're telling these stories very actively on social media, also putting it on our website. So, we have a banner scroll that changes all of the time. These are voices and our beneficiaries that we're telling the stories, pretty, stark existential situations. Those are the stories we're actually highlighting. And what's been very, very insightful is in our pharma business, which is in the US and in the UK, our customers and our partners have been very, very interested in knowing what we're doing in very remote towns like, in Assam, Burma and stuff like that. So we don't realize the power of social impact. It's irrelevant and where boundaries are concerned. So it doesn't matter which geography you are in, as long as you're contributing to the lives and betterment of others, it's relevant across geographies.
Shilpa, Ritesh, you guys have any response? Or maybe I will have Madan, who is in the queue right now, and would like to ask you guys a question.
Sure. Sure.
Madan?
And the client, PR agency and the client change in the near future, post-COVID future, what would be your new, let's say, expectations from a PR consulting firm that is partnering you?
I'm happy to go on that one. Hi, Madan. Always a pleasure to have you, present in discussions. I think at Pirimal, what we're continuing to do is engage more actively with all stakeholders. So in terms of PR agency support, I believe now we're probably going to work even more cohesively with the agency in finding different paradigms and different constructs of reaching to different stakeholders. It's going to be even more hyper segmented, more regional, more personal, and we probably will have many campaigns going on at the same time. So thinking creatively, innovatively, and always looking at how are we building thought leadership, because increasingly it's going to be a very, very cluttered space now to gain thought leadership. Everyone's going to put much more effort into building a rapport with stakeholders, with customers, with with larger audiences. How are we thinking creatively, differently, and doing things, um, fewer things, but more impactful things. And also digital support. I think as we turn more digital and more video related, content is going to be big. VR, AR, bringing in those elements. How are we leveraging those tools to actually tell our stories better? And also looking at how can we tell, drive our narrative to a more comprehensive and holistic manner now, because I think it's going to be even more about who we are rather than what we do.
Does just Shilpa or Ritesh have a view too on how the agency client relationship will potentially change?
The relationship doesn't change, but I will just add to what what Dimple said. And I would actually second that point of going more digital, because we all agree to one fact that the pandemic is here to stay. It's not going so easily in the near term, at least. Uh, I think that's all we agree to. But how do we communicate creatively and differently? Because as brands, everybody's trying to be relevant and everybody's trying to be more impactful. But there's very limited space, and how agencies can think differently and creatively for each client, knowing their stakeholders in the background, with the use of digital at the same time. So that kind of creative input, or that kind of valuable input, would actually be required from the agency side, uh, in the future times. And especially when we're going more and more digital as organizations, how can we leverage our existing digital platforms? I'm just giving a hypothetical example. At SBI, we have the largest, say, followers or likes on the social media on all platforms. How can we leverage that for using our PR activity in the times to come, because that comes at a lesser cost compared to any other thing.
Thank you.
Shilpa.
Sorry, I got dropped off for a moment. If you could do
Shilpa, the question was how will the PR agency client relationship change in the post-COVID era, and what would be new client expectations from a PR consulting partner?
Oh, understand. So I'll tell you, you are our eyes and ears to the world outside our firm. All said and done, as organizations, we tend to be extremely inward looking. We tend to be regimented in the way we look at things. We will be a little sluggish in the way we respond to things. And for us, you are our eyes and ears. And you have a sense of which way the wind is blowing and what should brands do to be able to keep themselves afloat and alive. In that context, vis-a-vis the what I would call BAU method of working, the fact that most situations we see going forward aren't going to be in the BAU phase, in my mind, we will have to find workarounds to the way we've always done, whether it's cost being a very strong lens, whether it's finding effective ways of using available resources. And by resources is whether it's people, whether it's our partnerships, whether it's our relationships across. I think every dimension will change, because it's the new paradigm that we're moving to. And in that context, I think people such as you, who have access to both sides of the relationship, what is the media side, the lens of what are people reading, what are people watching, and the firm side, saying what are the priorities and the immediate goals, and marrying the two to be able to give very compelling advice, saying now that we understand your goal vis-a-vis what the market is doing, what's a good strategy or what's the changing gears that you need to do to, in my mind, four things. Continue to stay relevant to not just your immediate audience, but your overall ecosystem in which you operate. To be seen in a very favorable way with the regulator. That's an important body for us to keep watch for. Our stakeholders, we are an NBFC, so banks and bank partnerships as well as rating agencies are important parts of our ecosystem. And fourth, customers and media in general. So managing this entire relationship across all of these stakeholders may not continue to be the way it's been because we've never been challenged enough. Now, because we have changing dynamics, I think your role becomes even more important in my mind, more as an advisor than an executor, because we will largely be guided by our thinking as a firm, whereas you'll be looking at what are people expecting of you as a firm in the overall context of what's changed.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. I think we have one time for just one last question. That question is from Asim Sood. Have you modified your communications objectives because of COVID? Can you share what has changed?
So I can take that partially. Communication objective may not have been modified to a larger extent, but the way we communicate, the methods of communication has surely been modified. Use of more digital, being more empathetic in the kind of communication we do. Uh, Obviously some sense of communication objective gets changed because these are all aligned to the business objectives end of the day, and the business, as we all understand, that will going to be suffered in the next in the few years to come, rather not even can't even say months, but in the years to come. So that objectives gets changed, but moreover the way we communicate and the methods we use for communication surely gets changed post COVID-19 scenario.
My view is for a very long time, I've had aversion to this definition that all marketers and marketing teams have, that we are a cost center. If you see yourself as cost center, you'll continue to be called cost center. But if you look at your job as not a cost center or a manager of a budget, but as a driver of business growth, it completely changes your lens, saying now that things have changed and your business projections don't stand entirely the way you had forecasted. What are the changing dynamics of business, and how does business change gear, and how do, as a front end team whose job is to communicate business objectives to customers, that will have to change big time. My sense is for most of us, retaining our existing customers and continuing to keep a very healthy portfolio is primary. In that context, the way we manage our budget allocation, who do we put our monies on, or what are the segments we should deeper or do engagement with, what are the segments we can afford to let go of, how do we manage overall budgets between wanting to acquire new customers versus retaining and building loyalty with our own. I think the objectives may not change, the relative priorities may change big time. And because of these priorities, the kind of stuff we end up doing may be very different from what we've traditionally done or may have done last year. For example, my biggest mandate this year is how do you continue to protect your portfolio, which means by design, talking to our existing customers will take far more mind share and far more share of our overall pie in terms of activities, because that's the need of the hour.
Yeah, so I think in many ways we've had to reboot. What we did in the past will perhaps not be relevant in many ways in the new construct. So a lot of our, we've all, I think, irrespective of which industry, we've all have had to go through, budget cuts. So we're getting more nimbler, cannot do on-ground events. So our objectives have been, like I said, to retain focus on business resilience. Perhaps, not so much in the past. It was all, hunky-dory. We were all, in the state of bonhomie and exhilaration. But, hey, what? There's a reality check that I think all of us have had to, been forced to go through. And I think it's a good thing. We're now thinking more agilely, more constructively, looking at, what is the most impactful things that we need to focus on. And if it's fluff, can we do away with the fluff? So we're getting more efficient, we're getting more efficacious, we're getting more relevant, more impactful. But I think the single single most important thing that we are going through, and we will continue to do that in the days, months, and perhaps in the foreseeable future, is how are we as a communications function, how are we adding value to business outcomes? I mean, that construct has just not changed. So our comms objectives has always been that. How are we adding value to business outcomes? So yes, extraneous factors have changed, environment has changed, companies have changed, and individuals have changed, right? But that construct has not. So communications objectives will perhaps, not go through a drastic change, but what we do, what are those business outcomes that we're now chasing, have completely and dynametrically actually undergone huge change.
So thank you, panel. It's been an absolute delight to hear your perspectives and the innovations that you have been initiating to keep the communications line flowing. I'm confident that the Indian BFSI sector is more resilient and we will rise up to this challenge. Over to you, Anubhuti.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ara, for this moderating this wonderful session. Thank you, all the panelists, Ritesh, Dimple, Shilpa. Thank you so much. I'm sure our attendees are taking back a lot of learnings. And, just to give you an idea of how important this discussion was, today we had about 302 signups. That's a big number. And I'm sure they're all going back with some great learning. So thank you everyone for this afternoon, and we'll see you again next Friday with representatives from startups. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.